to home.
Namaste. Today I want to share with you one of my most favorite sutras of all, from the Mahāsuññatāsutta. Ānanda, a monk does not shine if he delights in company, enjoys company, is committed to delighting in company. If he delights in a group, enjoys a group, rejoices in a group. Indeed, Ānanda, it is impossible that a monk who delights in company, enjoys company, is committed to delighting in company, who delights in a group, enjoys a group, rejoices in a group, will obtain at will, without difficulty, without trouble, the pleasure of renunciation, the pleasure of seclusion, the pleasure of peace, the pleasure of self-awakening. But it is possible that a monk who lives alone, withdrawn from the group, can expect to obtain at will, without difficulty, without trouble, the pleasure of renunciation, the pleasure of seclusion, the pleasure of peace, the pleasure of self-awakening. I love this sutra. And the reason I love it is that not only does it reflect my own experience, but it also points out the deficiency in modern so-called Buddhism. If we look at any Buddhist source of information, what do we see? Groups and groups and groups. Sanghas and sasanas and monasteries and sects and cults, and all groups and groups and groups. Nowhere do we see encouragement for individual sadhana. Everywhere it is simply assumed that one must be a member of a group, and not only in Buddhism, also in many, many other religions. So, the Buddha is here to tell us that this is bogus. And then we wonder, well, why aren't people becoming enlightened? Why aren't people realizing nibbana? Why aren't people attaining self-realization? And Buddha gives the complete answer right here. A monk does not shine. What does it mean to shine? Well, besides the obvious meaning that he's going to be happy and have a shining countenance, it also means that he is not going to become accomplished. Because one of the meanings of shine is to excel at something, isn't it? So a monk cannot excel, cannot shine with that inner glow of divine light in a group situation. In fact, the Buddha says it's impossible. Impossible. And if you read the suttas, which I highly recommend, you will find hundreds of instances where the Buddha will instruct someone, and then after he's given the instruction and he's satisfied that the student or disciple has understood, he'll say, now go alone to the roots of a tree, an abandoned building, a forest, the bank of a river, a field, or wherever you can find solitude and do what needs to be done. This implies that one cannot do what needs to be done in the context of a group. Why? Because group dynamics, group think, group association is a fabrication. Because in a group, you have a pecking order, you have a hierarchy. You have the assumption that one person is better than another person. You have the practice that one person can give instruction or orders to another person. And unless you happen to be the top guy, the guy at the top of the totem pole, somebody's going to be giving you instructions, interrupting your practice and telling you to go here, do this, or whatever. Or chastising you, criticizing, finding fault with you. And this is poison for self-realization, poison for enlightenment, poison for finding peace. And what is enlightenment? Here he says very clearly, the pleasure of renunciation, the pleasure of seclusion, the pleasure of peace, the pleasure of self-awakening. It's something you do to yourself, by yourself. This is another misconception around groups, that there's something special about the group or the leader or the teaching or whatever that can somehow aid in your process of self-awakening. That's contradictory. Self-awakening cannot come from others. It can only come from yourself. Now, instruction can come from others. Discipline can come from others. Support, understanding, love and affection, friendship, all these can come from others. But that's not going to, directly anyway, give you self-awakening, self-realization. That's something only you can do for yourself. And the sutra goes on. Indeed, Ānanda, it is impossible that a monk who delights in company, enjoys company, is committed to delighting in company, who delights in a group, enjoys a group, rejoices in a group, will enter and remain in the awareness release that is temporary and pleasing, or in the awareness release that is not temporary and beyond provocation. But it is possible that a monk who lives alone, withdrawn from the group, can expect to enter and remain in the awareness release that is temporary and pleasing, or in the awareness release that is not temporary and beyond provocation. Ānanda, I do not envision even a single form whose change and alteration would not give rise to sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, and despair in one who is passionate for it and takes delight in it. So this is the problem with groups. Because groups are fabrications, they're temporary. If you've ever been in a group, and everyone has in school, for example, or in a family, they're always changing. There's competition. Different people are rising in position or falling in position. It's never steady. It's never certain. So, if one becomes invested in some feature of a group, he is bound to be disappointed in the end when that disappears. And this is the cause of stress, suffering, lamentation, bereavement, pain. You see? Why should one become dependent on something that is temporary, known to be impermanent, changeable, and non-lasting? In such a context, one cannot even, in fact, the Buddha again uses the word impossible to attain the awareness release, the liberation of the awareness, even the one that's temporary, which in Buddhist culture is called pleasant abiding, which means to abide in emptiness, and then to arise from that and come back into the world, come back out of solitude and into company, and so on. What to speak of the awareness release that's permanent? In other words, nibbana, samadhi, self-realization. So then let's read one more paragraph. But there is this mental dwelling discovered by the Tathagata, where, not attending to any themes, he enters and remains in internal emptiness. If, while he is dwelling there, by means of this dwelling, he is visited by monks, nuns, laymen, laywomen, kings, royal ministers, sectarians, and their disciples, then, with his mind bent on seclusion, tending towards seclusion, inclined towards seclusion, aiming at seclusion, relishing renunciation, having destroyed those qualities that are the basis for mental fermentation, he converses with them only as much as is necessary for them to take their leave. In other words, hi, thanks for coming. When are you going? You see, because a person who realizes emptiness, a person who realizes the self or Brahman, which are the same thing, their mind becomes inclined towards that because it is the relief from all suffering. It's the solution to all problems. It's the most beautiful thing, the most pleasurable thing, the most noble and wonderful thing that is possible. So once someone has experienced that, they're always going to be thinking of it. Their mind becomes inclined toward it. They begin to aim toward it in their every activity, thinking, speaking, and action. And so anything that distracts them from that aim, from that goal, is something they want to minimize as far as possible. So the danger is, and he goes on in this sutta, this Mahāsuññatāsutta, he goes on to describe the dangers that one may be practicing in solitude, but then acquire a reputation among the local people for being renounced, or for being austere, or learned, or spiritually advanced. And because of that, all kinds of people will come to visit. He becomes attractive. He becomes well known in the community, or at least known about. And so people come to see him, some with a desire to learn from him, some with a desire to mock him, or disprove his teaching, or find some fault in him. This is all something he has or wants nothing to do with. So one in this position acquires the art of turning people away politely and conversing with them just enough to make them feel satisfied, and then sending them away with some lesson that will benefit their lives. Because there's no pleasure in this world like the pleasure of seclusion, of renunciation, of austerity, of meditation, of emptiness, of enlightenment, of self-awakening. Aum Tat Sat. Aum Shakti Aum.